Hello, I'm glad you could join me. My name is Jeffrey Green. I'll be sharing with you the nuances of layering and burnishing with colored pencils. I'm working on a shell still life. It's a number of shells arranged on a wood surface, so there's a lot of exciting earth tone to enjoy. Thank you for joining me. Down here you can see my humble workstation. I keep this next to me on my left side as I draw, and I usually have a set selection of colors to work with for each piece that I'm doing, and I see my coffee cup is empty. Have to do something about that. Okay, what we have here is a shell still life in colored pencils. You can see there's an area here that I've worked pretty well on, and an area that I haven't done anything on yet. The area in the upper left here is not done, it's just more done. Colored pencils is all about layering, and that's what I'll be highlighting today. The wood surface that the shells are on is on a diagonal, which is a little unusual. I wanted the unusualness of it, and I'm hoping that after the work is done, the shading of the shells on the wood will really bring it together to give something different for the eyes. Now, the first thing I'll be doing is working on this shell right here, and I'll be putting down a little of 20% gray. I'm using Prismacolor. I always work from light to dark. Colored pencils is all about building your subject. It takes a lot of layering and burnishing, which I will get to as we go along. I can't help my art desk here is squeaking a little bit, but we'll deal with that. I'm just putting a light layer of gray on here. Since I'm working with a shell that has a lot of subtle coloring, it's not going to be quite so easy in the camera to see exactly what I'm doing, so I'm only going to work on the shell a little bit, and then we'll be doing vicariously you'll be joining me, that is. I'll be working on the wood tones here because it'll be a lot better to be able to see in the camera. So again, I'm using a light layer of gray here. I work with pretty light layers at a time. Of course, it depends on the part of the subject you're doing. With the wood, I'll be laying down a heavier tone of color. But at least for this very light colored white shell, I'm putting a very subtle layer down. I nearly always work from light to dark. That's pretty important when it comes to layering, which is what colored pencils is all about. So, I have a very, very light layer there of cool gray. Cool indeed. I'll be putting down another layer on top of that with 50% cool gray. Right underneath here where the shadow is. There we go. It's always important when doing colored pencils, especially when you're starting out, to train your eyes and your hand to build your subject. If you're too heavy-handed all at once, you're going to find you're putting down way too much wax, which is what colored pencils are made out of, and you're not going to be able to work with it very much. So I have some cool gray there, 50%. And on top of that, I'm going to put down a layer of cloud blue to highlight the shadow right here. Alrighty. We got a happy shadow there. I'll just pull down some of the cloud blue in the shell here. I've tried solving the squeak of my art desk, but it just ain't working, so I'm afraid it'll have to stay. There we go. Now, there's a lot of different colors in this shell, even though it's very light in color. The next thing I'll be doing is layering ginger root right on top of these layers here. There we go. With the kind of art that I do, which is realism, it's very important to draw what I see. I'm drawing what I see. I use references most always with my art. I do usually use photo references. It's not in the picture here because I really wanted to focus on the artwork itself, and I usually don't show the photo references very often unless it's a class, because I really don't want the artwork to be judged according to a photo. The photo really just serves as a way of looking at the subject for me, so that's normally why I don't do that. But of course in a class it's a lot different. I really just wanted to focus on just showing how to mix tones and layers together here. Now I'll be adding a little, let's see, burnt ochre on top of these layers here, just highlighting some of the different hues in the shell. We'll be coming back to that color again with the wood. I'm going to add just a little bit, not too much, in the shadow on the top part of the shell here. Alrighty. Next, I'll be adding a little lavender in the shadow on the top of the shell here. Now, again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but we're working with very light tones here. Just one layer on top of another. We're building layers. This shell is quite done, but what I'm doing here, I did exactly the same thing with the shell. I just layered light layers on top of each other. You can see there's all kinds of different colors in there. Orange, vermilion, lavender, blue, brown, all kinds of different colors in there. I did it the same exact way that I'm doing this shell right here. Now I'm going to mix in a little bit more of the cloud blue down here, just to give some more definition. I think what I'm also going to do, it needs just a little bit more tone here, a subtle one. Putty beige is a very subtle color I like to use. I'm going to mix that over here on the shell. Everything, of course, has to have a fancy name in order to describe the color. But then again, there are so many different colors, you have to call them something. I've been using Prismacolor colored pencils pretty much since I started drawing, which was quite a long time ago now. Well over 20 years ago. There we go. I'll mix a little bit more 50% gray here on the top where the shading is, to really pull that shadow out there. And then what I'm going to do is add, it's kind of a dull blue color called periwinkle. What a lovely name indeed. Here we go. Now that I have a few layers there, I'm going to take the white colored pencil, which for colored pencils kind of serves as a paintbrush. What the colored pencil does is it blends the previous light layers together, it pushes it into the paper somewhat, and it gives it a rich color to it. Of course, that effect goes on the more you do it. What I do, basically, this is what I do. I layer, and then I burnish, then I layer again, and then I burnish, then I layer and burnish. It's a process I do through the whole entire thing. So the layers that I put here on the shell, I'll burnish with this white colored pencil over top of all the layers that I just did. Colored pencils can seem a little complicated, or you might not really understand what it's all about when you've done very little of it or have not done it at all. But really, it's not rocket science. It's very simple. Really, what it's all about is repetition. What I did here was layer different light layers on top of each other, and then I burnished them. And now, repetitively, what I will go back and do is put layers right back on top of what I burnished. Right now, I'm adding a little cool gray, 20%. Oops, my pencils are falling on the floor, but that's usual. Okay. I'll put a little more 50% gray here where the shadow is. As you can see, it's really repetition. Layers on top of layers and then burnishing. Mixing colors together, layering them on top of each other. I'll pull some of this gray down here. Add a little more ginger root in here. Let's see. I need another color here. How about some 30% cold gray? We'll put some more definition in the shell over here. When I do my classes, because everyone needs to see what I do, I work on an easel standing up. So if you've been to my class, you're used to seeing me do the colored pencils that way. At home, I use a raised level art desk to save my neck and my shoulders, which especially for my neck, I do have a great deal of trouble with, that give me a lot of headaches and such. I wouldn't say having a raised level solves the problem, but it definitely doesn't make it worse, if you know what I mean. All right. Let's add some more 50% gray here. So this is basically what I do. It's not complicated. Like I said, it's repetitive. It's a matter of drawing what I see and doing so by building the subject. And and when you're doing oil painting or acrylic paint, you're putting directly on the canvas. You're putting full-blown color right on there. With colored pencils, I'm building the subject one little layer at a time. And it does take time, but I love what I do, so the time to me, it's just part of the process, really. I don't mind it at all. Why would I mind the time if I enjoy what I'm doing? Naturally, drawing is very peaceful. That's one thing people discover when they take my classes, is how peaceful and relaxing drawing can be. Let's put a little bit more shading in here. So I could have put a couple more layers there. I'll take my white color pencil. The dentist drill sound you just heard was my pencil sharpener. And now I'll take the white color pencil and burnish the layers that I just did. A lot of times when I burnish, I do so in the opposite way that I do my pencil lines. It just helps to mix it better. Since I am subject to time in a video, I'm working very fast here. I don't always work this fast. Sometimes I draw a lot slower and in greater detail. Right now I'm just kind of doing that just to kind of generally show what it is that I do. Okay. So we worked on the shell a little bit there. And since it's such a light tone and hard to see in the video, I'm going to do a little work on the wood. Now, the first color I will be using is unknowable. I sharpened the wrong end. You really don't want to do that. I should know the color. I've seen it often enough times. Oh boy. Well, it's a lighter brown anyway. We'll go with that. I'm using a color pencil extender here. They're very helpful so as not to waste colored pencils. Now I'm going to take this light brown color and I'm going to go with the grain of the wood. Usually when I draw, I follow the contours of whatever I'm doing. You can see in the shell up here, I followed the contours there. I followed the contours of the shell there. The more layers that you do on top of each other, it doesn't show up so much, but with the wood, it certainly will. So I'm going to put a light layer down of this light brown, the name of which you would think I would know by now, wouldn't you? But it escapes me at the moment. Alrighty. you can see how dark, and this is not by any means done, you can see how dark the wood tone is up here and how light I'm applying the colored pencil here. Alrighty. I have another shell right here. We got a shell, 3 shells here, and a wood turning piece up here. That was done by an artist friend in our art society who took wood turning to a whole nother level, like an art form. My art desk comes equipped with a small black thing here to hold the paper, but I find it too small, so I have a ruler stuck in there to make it larger. That way my paper doesn't fall off the table, since I'm very prone to those sort of things. So far I've only dropped 3 colored pencils on the floor in the space of a few minutes. Okay, so we have a light layer of light brown there. Now, I'm going to go back to the color ginger root, and over top of that brown, I'm going to layer that in there. Again, I work from light to dark, building the subject. In fact, when I first look at a subject and sit down to do colored pencils, there will probably be a lot of dramatic lighting and shading, a lot of rich color, but the first thing that my eye looks for is the lightest color. The lightest color is what I put down first. For this, it's I did put down the brown, but for this, it's kind of the ginger root color, or a murky gold color of the wood. If you have any questions about colored pencils or colored pencil technique, feel free to email me, or if you're watching on social media, feel free to share them in the comments. I'd be happy to answer them. All right, we got some light brown there. We got some ginger root. Now let's put a layer of burnt ochre down, shall we? Okay. You can see I'm being a lot more delicate for this color. Alrighty. No matter what color pencil piece you see of mine, this is exactly how I do it. It's really rather simple. It's not that complicated. It's just a matter of layering and burnishing. I've been using colored pencils, like I said, for a very long time, so I'm quite used to how they work. But no matter what level that you may be, it's really just a matter of layering and burnishing. And really, like any other media you may use, it could be painting, it could be colored pencils, it could be drawing conventional pencils. Not everyone does it the same way. Not everyone who uses colored pencils, and there are many artists now who do, not only across the US, but internationally. There are a lot of well-known colored pencil artists. But, certainly colored pencils is ideal for realism because you have so much control over the medium. As you can see, I'm controlling every layer. Uh, I have a lot of control in what I do, whereas with painting, the paint and the brush have at least some of the control. But not everyone needs to do colored pencils exactly the way I do, or exactly the way anyone does. We all have our own particular style, and we all have our own ways of doing things when it comes to art, and it's all good, really. This just happens to be what I do, and the technique is basically the same, whether you're going to have a less realism in your art or more. I'm putting a little shading underneath the shell here with the burnt ochre. There we go. Alrighty. Now let's take some, well, dark brown. Let's use that. There are so many different hues of brown, reds, greens. There's a million different colors, different shades. Prismacolor has a very wide range of colors, which is one thing I really enjoy. The other thing I enjoy is they're an artist grade pencil, but they don't cost an arm and a leg. Well, overall, to get them all, it isn't exactly cheap either, but once you build up a supply, it works out much better. I'm using dark brown for the shading under the shell here, layering right on top of the layers that I did. This is a perfect example of how I started out very light with the light brown, the ginger root, the burnt ochre, and the dark brown, and they're building on top of each other. I'm building the subject. Yes, I'm building the subject as my halogen lamp crackles in my ear. It's never been the same since I changed the bulb, unfortunately, but it does serve its purpose, of course. Alrighty. Alrighty, I got some dark brown there. On top of that, I'll be putting some dark umber, which is brown, but just a darker brown. I'll be putting that on top of the dark brown, right underneath the shell here. I can't stress enough how, when you're learning to draw, if you have any kind of realism in your art, not necessarily that it is a hyper-realistic picture, but if you have light and shade in your art, it's very important to draw what you see. As I draw, my eye bounces back and forth constantly between the surface of my drawing and my photo reference. If I were not to do that, eventually I would start drawing what my mind thinks a shell looks like, what my mind would like to portray a shell as looking like, which would usually kind of have a cartoonistic kind of look to it. It's very important whether you're using a photo reference, you're drawing from life, whether you're doing it outdoors or you're doing it in your own studio, as I am here, to have some sort of model that you're looking at, especially when doing at least some form of realism. And by that I mean it, you know, you might not have a very realistic style, but if it has form, if it has light and shade, it's very important to constantly refer back and forth between the model and your drawing. Now, before I burnish this, I'm going to put down another layer of, well, let me see. I was going to put down burnt ochre, but how about a layer of bronze? We'll mix that in there. Bronze is a very light colored brown, like a very, very dark gold, or a dark gold gray. Put some bronze in there. Not only do I work from light to dark when I do my drawings, I do the same things with the details of my art. You can see here, the detail right now is very general. I'm not worrying so much about the grain of the wood as I actually I didn't even do it that much except for up there. I'm not worrying about the extreme details of things right away. I build the details just like I do the light and shade. The shell here does not have that much detail, and certainly the wood doesn't yet. It's something that I build, and it gets more complicated as I go along. Okay. We'll be putting a layered, putting down, well, you're joining me, indeed. A layer of burnt ochre here, on top of the layers I did there for the wood tone. I'll put it in a little heavier here by the shading. Mix it in there underneath the shell. And next, I'll be taking out my trusty white colored pencil and burnishing, which of course I do have with me. The very first demo I ever did, I brought a work in progress to show people what I do, and I forgot the most important thing, the white colored pencil. So I had to explain what it would look like if I did have one. Anyway, I'll be burnishing these layers here with the white colored pencil. I'm doing it against the grain just to mix it a little bit. Again, I appear to be working, well, maybe not to the viewer, it doesn't seem like I'm working very fast, but for me, I'm doing very fast gestures, and really, my hand is moving rather quickly. I don't always do that. I do that in my classes, and for the sake of the video, I'm doing it so that I don't just, so it doesn't look like I'm just sitting here doing nothing. Colored pencils does take a lot of time, indeed, but it's certainly not sitting here doing nothing. It just has a lot of nuance to it. Layering and burnishing, that's what it's all about. Alrighty, now, before I finish up with the video here, you can see what's been done up until this point, but just to give you an idea of what it really is to build your subject with the layers, I'll be putting down one of my favorite colors, terracotta, underneath the shell on top of the brown, to really pull the shadow out and give it a rich color on the wood. A lot of the richness of this may not show up on a webcam, but in the future I hope to do things in a more elaborate way with videos and a camera. So the detail can be seen more easily. So we got some terracotta in there. I think when it comes to doing art, especially colored pencils, the thing that makes me the most excited is subtlety. There are a lot of rich colors and shading in most of my work, and when this is done, there certainly will be on the wood underneath the shells and in some of the wood of the wood turning there. But it's the subtleness of a lot of things that really excite me. I love doing that kind of stuff, and I love what the kind of thing that I'm doing now, where you have brown underneath the shell, the shadow, and I'm adding terracotta in there to give it another level of color. And no matter what you're looking at, it could be an apple, it could be wood, it could be water. No matter what you look at, there's never just one simple color in there. Our eye sees a certain color with wood, with whatever kind of wood it is, but in reality there are so many different tones of color. And even in a shadow here, there's a lot of colors inside that shadow. Normally I wouldn't do this so far ahead. I would wait well into this. But I'm gonna put a little black here, a layer of black, just to pull the shadow out some. Normally I don't do this deep of detail until I get a lot more work done in the shell and the surrounding area. You can see right here, there's a shadow underneath the shell, but although it has a lot more color here, it's not done yet even there. The shell is mostly done itself, but the wood needs a lot of work. And once I get down the shadows and the depth of the wood, I'll start drawing the grains of the wood in there. And, you know, like I said, I build everything. I don't do the grains of the wood right away. I do that as I move along. So I got some black there to define the shadow a little bit more. Now, like I said, I use a white colored pencil for burnishing. There are times during my piece where I will use a colorless blender, and that's what this is right here. I don't do that until I have enough layers built up, though. It's really not effective unless you do that. I don't use it for the whole piece because I just find that the white colored pencil just gives a more rich look to it and a more painterly tone to the art pieces. But I'm blending the area of the shadow here with the colorless blender. Alrighty. Put some ginger root in here. Any light color will burnish it to some degree. Maybe very quickly. I'll add some goldenrod in here. So basically, that's what colored pencils is all about. This is how I do each of my pieces. It's just a matter of layering color on top of color on top of color, layering the shaded areas, mixing the colors together, uh, forming the object with shade and different hues, and then burnishing with the white colored pencil. So I'm looking forward to see how this piece turns out. It's I've done shell still lifes before, and the diagonal view of the table here is a little unusual, but I really wanted it to be that way, just to give a different view. I'm really looking forward to seeing how it turns out, especially with the shading on the wood. I'm really looking forward to doing that. There's a lot of different tones here. Right here, it's much more dark in the subject. But I want to thank you for joining me. Thank you for watching. You may want to have skipped ahead because this is a process of building the subject, and like I said, it does take time. But thank you for joining me, and I look forward to sharing with you again in the future. Thank you so much.